All right, hello there, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm Rajmora, and today I'm joined by Nili for what will be a very special type of video that I'm really excited about. In this video, we'll be going back to the past to tell you the story of what was probably one of the most memorable, consequential, and perhaps even scandalous tournaments in the history of Age of Empires 2. This tournament was played almost 10 years ago, but if you're a fan of Age of Empires 2, you'll definitely recognize a lot of the names that will come up during the story. So I do hope you'll find this video interesting. And if you do, feel free to like, comment, and most importantly, subscribe to the channel. So we'll be showing you lots of pictures and videos throughout the story. So to those of you who are used to only listening to us, in order to get the full experience, I do recommend you actually watch this video. So Nili, this will be the story of the WSVG LAN tournament in the Maldives, which took place in October of 2015. And both Nili and I were there to witness the whole thing live. But Nili, telling the story of this tournament was actually your idea. I think we first discussed it during NAC 5, if I'm not mistaken. So why did you want to talk about this tournament specifically?
Maybe even before that, it felt like I contacted you like last summer or something, right? And like we could have a lot of options for like very clickbaity titles here, like the 1.4 million scam in the Maldives, and how like the big Tyrant sponsors last event in here. And I think there's some stories to be told, and yeah, I'm really excited for our talk now.
All right. So, before we talk about the tournament itself, I'd like to sort of set the stage for what the scene looked like back then. Before, this was all before we didn't have the definitive edition, of course. And so, in the early years of Age of Empires 2, everybody who wanted to play online would go to what was called the Zone, which was basically Microsoft's official platform. In 2006, and I'm actually not entirely sure about this, Nili, was it 2006? I think for reasons we don't want to get into right now, Microsoft decides to close the zone, which means suddenly thousands of players have no way to play online anymore. The community has always been very resourceful, though, and shortly after the closure of the zone, a group of very skilled coders got together to basically create a client that looked pretty much exactly like the Zone did. It was all volunteer work, of course, and this new platform went through different names and different iterations. But at some point, they just decided to call it Vubly, which is a name that a lot of people probably would have heard by now. And up until 2019, which was the year DE was released, virtually every major tournament was actually played on Vubly. Right. So in 2013, Microsoft just decides to launch what back then was called the HD version. Today, that game is simply called, I think, what is it? Age of Empires 2 2013 on Steam, something like that. Yeah, but again, that version
HD
was
and in brackets 2013, something like that.
something like that. Yeah, but again, that version was very buggy. There were a lot of features missing that were available on Vubly. Lots of crashes. There were just too many things not working, which means like the professional scene never really adopted the HD version and simply remained on Vubly. There was basically no support for competitive Age of Empires 2 back then for Microsoft's part, right? So we're talking about 2014, 2015 here. That all came much, much later, which means tournaments were sort of rare and far in between and would always be funded and sponsored by wealthy individuals like the Tyrant sponsor or the SY sponsors. There were a lot of others, right? Like Pinstack, who else?
Arbalest in the very early days, like 2001 to 2008, something like that, 2006.
Arbalest, then we had later on, I think, Carlini, Matt Salsa. So it was always like individual guys and never really Microsoft. To be fair, there were a couple of Microsoft sponsored tournaments when the HD version was released. What was it? The Battle of Angkor. I remember that name.
EGC TV of Escape Gaming, I mean, is coming from Microsoft money a lot. Like Battle of Angkor was the starter, right? Then we had some HD tournaments, and then we had basically a studio in Manchester with 4 people working there full time and kind of building up towards DE. Sadly, the project didn't go as planned and had to shut down. But there was one private person that funded that made heavily, and obviously Microsoft gave a lot of the prize pool.
Right. So, but apart from that, basically every major tournament in that era, and this was also the case for the WSVG tournament, was organized by Vubly and played on Vubly. And the team responsible for organizing tournaments on Vubly had basically 3 members. That was Taff, was sort of the big boss of the whole thing. Then there was Jeanette, who I guess I would call him like the tech guy on the team. He took care of overlays, helped people set up their OBSs for stream. And then there was yours truly, me, and I basically was responsible for all the boring tasks, like writing rules, updating brackets, chasing players, stuff like that. We also had a streaming team on Woobly, which included a lot of members. I used to cast a few games here and there. You used to cast a few games here and there. But like I'll say 90% of the time, Woobly Official was actually live on Twitch. It was either Katsuni streaming or Mem streaming, and very often both of them, right? So they were basically the face of Woobly's Twitch channel. And by the way, whenever I mention Katsuni's name, I always caution that people not Google his name while at work, because he named himself after a porn star. So this was a very short summary of what it looked like back then. I left out a lot of details, but I think I covered the most important parts, Nili. Would you like to add something?
Yeah, basically it was a team of people that love the game, and everyone kind of shared the same Twitch account, which is super rare, right? We had up to like 15 people, I would say. Some names that are completely lost in our times, but a lot of people came from that. Like, most famous ones are obviously Mem, T90, me, and everyone like alternated. And basically, we had a file and we wrote, okay, I'm going to cover this event at that time. And everyone else, like, enjoy the event. And like, I hosted tournaments on Woobly Official, casting over there, for example. And it was more of a group project of friends back in 2012.
12, 13, 15, and so on. Right. So it's in this context of us having basically no Microsoft support and having barely any tournaments that WSVG enters the picture. So that would be a World Series of Video Games. So, Nili, what exactly was WSVG and what were their stated goals? I tried to look for this, but I think you have a bit more information than I do.
Well, WSVG was basically a tournament series that already went bankrupt earlier. Like, they had major tournaments in Counter-Strike, some other games with like fewer viewer numbers. You have to remember, like, streaming was way, way smaller in those times, right? So they were always combined with like offline tournaments and like big LANs or expositions. And well, they failed once, went bankrupt, then got bought again, and then worked together with Woobly. And I remember Tough saying, nearly, this is the best thing that could have happened to us after like Microsoft taking over Woobly.
Right. Short of Microsoft actually buying Woobly, this was basically the best thing that could have happened. He might have been a little bit wrong about that one. But yeah, so do you remember where the money came from, actually? Was it like investor money? Was it like rich kids with a lot of money?
I think a TV studio bought WSVG. Yeah, like a broadcast operation. Yeah.
Okay, still pretty incredible that they would try to involve Age of Empires 2 in a tournament like that. But and also I wonder, again, I try to remember all of these things, but it's such a long time ago. Why did they go for the Maldives? Why the Maldives and not something else?
This is pretty interesting. So I think it was actually the Maldives searching for tournament organizers because they were having troubles with like criminality of teens, like the typical 12 till 18 years old. Obviously, people on the Maldives, one major island, you can't go anywhere else, and they were trying to combat that and felt like, okay, computer gaming is evolving and we will do something for them. And that's, I think, how it all started from the Maldives side out.
Yeah, so this was all such a long time ago. I can't really remember anymore how the contact between WSVG and TAF started or how it was established. I can only remember one day he told us about the possibility of this LAN happening, but they would only agree to host Age of Empires 2 if we could come up with a $10,000 prize pool. And this is a very important detail in the story because there were several games at the LAN, and WSVG would supposedly be sponsoring all of the prize pools except for Age of Empires. And $10,000 might not sound like much for today's standards, but in a scene without any official sponsors whatsoever, how the hell are you going to get that kind of money, right? Now, fortunately at that time, we had just finished organizing The War is Coming, which is another big tournament organized by Woobly that might actually be a good candidate for another deep dive at some point, Nili. But long story short, Jeanette, Taff, and me, we all got $2,000 each from the Tyrant sponsor for our work as administrators during The War is Coming. And we just said, okay, we'll just take that money. We're going to put it in the prize pool for the WSVG tournament. And that's it. That still left us $4,000 short of the 10K goal, but Taff somehow managed to convince the Tyrant sponsor to give us another 4K. So basically, the Tyrant sponsor paid for the whole $10,000 prize pool. And I think this is what made Tav such a great leader. He was incredibly good with people. He always managed to get people to like him. He always managed to make people feel like he liked them. I truly miss him sometimes. I think he would be an incredible asset these days, too.
True.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really liked him.
Yeah. Okay. So the final stage of the tournament, the LAN stage, happened on October 5th, between October 5th and October 11th of 2015. And I say the final stage nearly because one thing you need to know about old tournaments is that they tended to be very drawn out. So this tournament had a massive qualification stage, which went from May 4th to July 13th. So almost 2.5 months of qualification, which we divided into 4 groups, 4 different stages. So we had 187 players signing up in total. I was actually surprised. I thought it would have been more. So only 187 players signing up. And I don't even remember exactly why, nearly. Again, this was 10 years ago. But we decided to make the first stage of the qualification regional based. So that means players would be playing against people in similar time zones. And maybe that was actually a part of the reason. Do you remember what was like the explanation for that? Why not just a single bracket?
I think it's mainly because it was the industry standard in all other games, right? To reduce the ping so people from South America play against people from South America, and you don't have like Dogao playing Mr. Yo with like 250 ping each.
I mean, that's actually, I didn't think about that, but that's totally true. I mean, for other games, that would make total sense because you have so many people playing. But in our game, it felt like it made but from today's point of view, it feels like it didn't make a lot of sense to do that. But you need to keep in mind, we obviously had no full-time players. So I think we also wanted to make it appealing to as many people as possible, and making it a little bit easier to schedule obviously would help in that sense, right? And I guess another reason is that there were lots of times where we didn't have any tournaments going on. So there's just a lot of time to make tournaments.
If you only have one tournament a month, like having a 3-month qualification process is like guaranteed more games for us as the streaming team.
Yeah, and it could justify stream more time. You get more support, ideally, all those kinds of things. In any case, Nelly, I don't want to bore people by going through every single stage of the qualifier, but I do want to talk about the last stage before the LAN, which we called the showdown stage. It had 16 players divided into 4 groups of 4, and finishing top 2 in a group would mean you would actually qualify for the Maldives. And here, folks will obviously recognize a lot of names. So, group 1, we had Viper, obviously completely dominating, which was pretty much par for the course back in 2015. And we had Dogao qualifying a second, which I'll say was no big surprise, right? It was pretty much an expected result, right?
I would think so as well. Looking at those names, like ACM was considered good, but not that good at that time. And I think most people would have predicted exactly that. Viper was like clearly number 1 in the world. So there was no question. And Dogao probably number 2 there, yeah.
And ACCM finishing 3rd might sound weird from today's perspective, but back then he wasn't even the best Vietnamese player. There was someone else was actually better. Group 2, though, was definitely the most surprising of them all. And again, you will recognize a lot of people here. So Yo being first, again, not a big shock, but Doubt not making it, I think was definitely a surprise, right?
Yeah, Doubt considered to be obviously one of the 8 players that kind of made most money out of Age of Empires, being in that Tyrant team. And he is, I think, was on the verge of being full-time. I think he was a bit more involved into poker those days. Not 100% sure, but clearly it was expected that he would be considered a top 8 player. Jinghua, obviously, in that Chinese dream team that was considered number 2 or the like 2nd or 3rd best team in the world. So he was a really big name, but no major success in 1v1s before this.
Right. I think the Nations Cup had been played like two years before this, maybe 1 year.
Was coming, right? Was coming happened the year before, like the second biggest Age of Empires tournament of all time, like the biggest for like 22 years or something. So that was basically, and there the SY was kind of on the verge of making it into the top 2 as well.
And they finished 3rd in that tournament, right? After both Tyrant teams. And speaking about Doubt still, I remember I asked him in an interview what happened there in this tournament. And he just said he was so used to not having to practice to actually qualify for a tournament. So he just assumed that was going to be the same thing in this tournament. And 4th in the group, another very well-known name, Tato, which again seems pretty unthinkable today. But yeah, he wasn't even close to being the player he's today. Tato back then, obviously, he hadn't even joined the Tyrant clan. He was still in this wolf pack, if I'm not mistaken. And he was too busy playing on Steam, to be fair. One of the few pros that actually played on Steam.
Yeah, true. Like Tato kind of had his breakthrough with the new civilizations being added. And he was like really creative, played those a lot. And he was more of like an A-tier player. And then with HD and those tournaments made the jump into S tiers.
All right, and then the two players qualifying in Group 3 will probably be a bit unknown to some folks because they haven't been active in a lot of years, in many years. But Riot was the undisputed best Brazilian player at the time. He was easily a top 5 player, I'll say, and at some points, maybe even a top 3 player. So him finishing first in the group, totally expected. And then we had Loiza finishing second. And Loiza was basically a very talented young man. I want to say he was around 18 years old nearly when the tournament happened. But unfortunately, he never really cared too much to practice, so he never actually won any big tournaments, right?
No, he was more of an arena player, team game player. Naps obviously was one of the biggest teams, like a group of friends that actually streamed in the early days as well. Very popular, big like crowd around them of like hardcore Age of Empires fans without having like the biggest names in there, but still truly successful. And yeah, it was nice to see him there. Quick story about Wonder. I met him some years later, and he actually said like this tournament meant so much for him during those times that he trained for like 12 hours every day for like 6 weeks.
Wow.
And his hand started to hurt so much after this that he couldn't click anymore. That's and basically, like, he couldn't play at all. Like, not saying he would have beat anyone there, but like that's just showing you like the gravity of how important this tournament was at that time
for the whole scene, right? How crazy this sounded back then, right? And to those wondering, pun intended, to those wondering where that whole joke about the clowns are coming from, this is the guy, Eighth Wonder, the one who started it in a pretty legendary post on AOC Zone back then. Okay, so moving on, in Group 4, we had Jordan and Bac T qualifying. Bac T, again, a name many will not know today anymore, but he was the best Vietnamese player. Again, someone who at some points, I want to say, was pushing the top 5 as well.
Certainly. Obviously, like, biggest problem there in Team Years was communication problem, right? He was the biggest name in Vietnam. Funny story about him. He also said, like, I will always play with my friends. I will never leave VNS. I think 2 weeks later, he joined Tyrant and got mocked for it, like, for years. And some people still had it on their AOC Zone signature under the name. But certainly, like, an absolute beast among me. One still, like, second to last Hidden Cup, still top 8 performance. Would have made it to NACs if we didn't have visa problems as well. So, certainly considered to be a top 6 player maybe at that time.
Thinking about it, people might actually have heard this name because of the Hidden Cup 5. Tristan just said he actually had to invite him. Fortunately or unfortunately, Bac T didn't respond to the message, so he didn't have to play.
No. He just became a father like a year ago, so a lot of stuff changed and focused away from Age of Empires, basically.
As for Jordan, for many years, he was like the only one who was able to challenge Viper and actually beat him. But I want to say, Neely, that in 2015, he was already sort of losing interest in Age of Empires. His level was sort of declining. And I remember feeling like he wasn't really close to Viper anymore. That was my feeling, at least.
It felt like they were still the top 3, Viper, Jordan, and Riot. But it was like a triangle in the sense that Jordan could still beat Viper. Viper always beat Riot, but Riot beat Jordan. So it still felt like if we wanted to make a top 3 lineup going into this tournament, it felt like Jordan was there. But yeah, he didn't have like the last urge afterwards coming to still like really compete to be the number 1 in the world, I would say, but he might say differently.
You must say, yeah. I'm looking at this round 4 game against Wrath, and I totally remember that game. He was losing 3-0. And then came back to a 4-3, right?
That's the story that I don't know if I'm allowed to say. Wrath, actually, because Jordan was such a big name, was so happy being up 3-0 that he started celebrating and taking shots.
I
And he
did not know
continued
about
taking
that.
shots, and he was down, okay, 3-1, no problem. And he kept drinking, and Jordan, from 3-0 down, got the comeback 4-3.
I had no clue about that. It's
I,
pretty funny, or actually not funny. It's actually sad, uh, but good to know. I mean, yeah, I guess we're gonna ask him if you have permission
yeah.
to share this story.
And still, good chance that Jordan gets the comeback anyways, and
Mhm.
also good chance that even with Red wins that, he still doesn't make it to the Maldives.
Mhm. True, true. Okay, so the 8 players who ended up qualifying, and I'm going to put a picture on the screen with all of them, or in the back row, you can see Riyad, Viper, Dogon, Yo, and Yinghua. And then in the front row, you have Jordan and Back T.
And
Behind Yinghua, you can actually see Paladin. He was there as the official Chinese caster, I think it was, nearly. And he was also an excellent player himself, but he didn't qualify. I think he didn't even sign up, actually.
yeah, he never liked 1v1s. Even if he tried to, I don't think he would have had any chance. But he was kind of the captain of the Chinese team at that time. So, like, a great Age of Empires mind, for sure.
Mhm. Missing from this picture is only Loiza, but we also have a second picture with all the players here, and you can see Loiza would be the one in the yellow shirt.
Jordan still with his smile.
And with his
Yeah.
glasses, too.
Yeah.
All right, so something I think folks will also be interested in hearing, Neely, is that back then we obviously had no ATP ranking or tournament elo or any of that fancy stuff. So the seeding for the showdown stage was made by having all players seed themselves. And it's easy to think of tons of ways for how this could go wrong and how people could manipulate the whole thing if they wanted to. But when you think about it, everybody knew each other. Nobody was full time. Everybody was just so happy to be playing. So I think we sort of knew things would work out well.
Yeah, and I still, for NSCs, did also like let the players seed themselves, right? It's obviously easier if you have a smaller group of players, and yeah, they all trusted each other. So I think it should work out with those people that we are working with.
And I think the seating was pretty much, I mean, to be fair, nobody was complaining about seating. This is pretty much a very modern problem, I'll say, in
Yeah.
Age of Empires 2. Nobody cared about that earlier on. Now,
Also,
Nearly,
it was double elimination, right? And then
true.
seeding matters a bit less then.
Absolutely. And now, nearly up until this point, the tournament had run pretty smoothly, I'll say. There were no delays, no major drama. But, as the date of the LAN was approaching, some signs started to emerge that something was not quite right about the organization of the event. And one of the first people to call attention to this was Zero Empires, who at the time was a massive Age of Empires content creator. But there was a bit of rivalry between him and Vubli, so he was not involved in the tournament in any way. So it was really easy for us to just say, okay, this guy is just jealous. That's all. He's just talking like this, but that's because he's jealous. But the
He was
fact is,
basically the enemy. He was the enemy of Vubli official at that time.
and people said some nasty things. Back and forth, not only Vubli.
Ooh, yeah, there was a nasty, like Vubli organized stream in Belgium, I believe, where they had like
The
live
LAN.
streams, everyone drinking,
In the LAN,
and
yeah.
they really trash talked him badly there. Wow, that felt bad.
And the thing is, Taff was actually present at that LAN, but he was sleeping when the whole thing took place. And the next morning, people told him about the stream, and he was so mad. Anyway, yeah. So the fact is, he was 100% correct, Nearly. The LAN would include several games. I think it was Age of Empires 2, StarCraft 2, Hearthstone, and I think FIFA. Those were the games that were going to be included, right? And so what Zero Empires pointed out was that for a tournament that supposedly was going to give hundreds of thousands of dollars in prizes, there just wasn't enough publicity, and the other games didn't seem to be taking it seriously at all. I think for StarCraft 2, only like 10 people signed up for the qualifiers, and the 8 players that actually made it there were actually not really top players. Do you remember something like that?
I know that one Chinese guy, like Maxat, the Protoss player, was kind of okayish, but still like that no Korean players made it there was kind of an indicator. Maybe it might have overlapped with like the big Korean leagues at that time, but the lineup certainly was not the who's who.
Which was surprising because when you have this big prize pool, or a supposedly big prize pool, you would expect people to sign up, right? Now, of course, another huge red flag were the plane tickets, or more specifically, the lack thereof. So, WSVG's promise was that all players would have travel and accommodation paid for. And to be fair, players did get their tickets relatively on time, I want to say. Now, Taff, Jeanette, and I, as the administrators of the tournament, we were also promised plane tickets, and so were Katsuni and Memb, who were supposed to be the official casters for Age of Empires 2. As the days approached, though, nobody got their tickets, and at some point, Taff, Jeanette, and I just said, okay, fuck it. We'll buy the tickets ourselves, and then we'll just hope they'll pay us back. Spoilers, they didn't. Unfortunately, Memb and Katsuni were not in a position to afford the tickets, so the only thing they could do was to hope WSVG would somehow keep their promise. Because during all that time, I remember the WSVG guy kept saying, yes, we will buy them tickets, don't worry, they will be there, and so on and so on. In your case, Nelly, I think you weren't promised anything, right? You were there on your own anyway.
I was there as a fan. I had nothing to do, no official involvement in the event, right? I just said, I will be there, I will watch the games, I will enjoy my time. I even arrived a day before everyone because my flight was cheaper that day. I stayed at a random hotel on a different island and then got back to the main island. So, I was very independent of this, but yeah, I kept hearing, yeah, Memb and Katsuni, they will make it. We already booked their flights. And then the assistant, oh, did we? Yeah, you were supposed to do that. I didn't know. And then we knew, oh God, and it's 2 days till we start the event. It's going to be tight.
I remember at that time, it was all over the news, this whole ISIS thing, the caliphate and stuff like that. And there were a couple of terrorist attacks around that time too. I remember I was so incredibly scared to travel to the Maldives. And I remember asking Taff, because he was there before us, it was 3 days before the beginning of the tournament. Hey, Taff, my wife is a little bit scared. She wasn't. I was. how safe is it there? You're yeah, it's cool. Don't you worry. Don't you worry. I was so scared. I remember we landed in Dubai because it was not a direct flight. And I was considering, let's just go back, please. I'm so scared. But then we did decide to go there, and everything was fine, just to be clear. In any case, Nearly, the day finally arrived. So we all traveled to the Maldives. And, the location is beautiful. The resort where the players sleep and where the tournament takes place is pretty nice. Not super luxurious or anything, but, it's got everything they need. Bandos was the name, or Bandos, or whatever you pronounce it. All players do make it there, though I seem to remember Back T had some problems, and you had to help him with it, wasn't it?
Okay, so Back T obviously very limited in his English, right? So everyone tries to fly in. He had a stopover, really struggling to travel on his own, and then he arrives at the Maldives airport and had to fill out immigration forms, right? Or just entrance forms, and had no chance of doing it, right? He sends me a picture. I sent him a full filled out answers, everything. He said I can't. And so he's sitting at the airport and can't fill out the form. And he writes, I don't know, what did we use in the old days to communicate?
TeamSpeak, maybe? No, not TeamSpeak.
No. Maybe we sent AOE zone messages towards each other. Maybe
or just Vooly?
Yeah. No. I think it was more likely that he was sitting there with his laptop. I don't even know. But it was really, really tough to even get a message through, right? Maybe we wrote some SMS and sent pictures via MMS. Some people won't even remember. So he was sitting at the airport and didn't know what to do, right? So what I did was I tried to communicate with him. So I called the airport and tried to say, okay, we have a player, this is his real name, but he might listen to Back T. Try to tell him and we will try to pick him up, right? Because we had someone from WSVG waiting on the other side. No chance. I think spoke to him 2 or 3 times. They shouted him out. No chance to get him to move or get to anyone official at the airport. So I know a Vietnamese guy that runs a Vietnamese restaurant in Germany. So I called him on one phone, tried to explain him the situation, and on the other phone, I had the airport. So I organized, holding 2 phones together, that the Vietnamese guy does a shout out in Vietnamese through the airport speaker. And you won't believe it, but it didn't work out. but I like the idea so much.
What a surprise! What a huge surprise.
We waited. I think we waited 4.5 hours in total, and then the airport security just said, "Yeah, you look so lonely. Just go through."
They just let him go. That's crazy. I think they wouldn't fly today, right? Maybe they wouldn't just let him go today. I don't know.
Unlikely, with more like formal involvement, probably.
Probably. Yeah. That's pretty crazy. I didn't remember any of that. It's pretty funny.
Yeah.
In any case, Nelly, we, casters and you, we didn't get to stay at the resort that all the players were, the Bandos resort. We actually had to travel every day from the capital. What was it? Male?
Yeah.
Male, with the boat. We traveled by boat, obviously, which honestly, I didn't think was a big deal. I thought it was actually a nice way to relax and, come down from the hardships of the day.
Well, small deal was that we were guaranteed to have it for free, but it actually cost WSVG $500 a day. Every single boat.
Like every single trip. A day?
Yeah. So we all had to go together every single time, even if we didn't have to do anything. If we wanted to be on the island at any part on the day, we would need to get in on the island with the first guy getting there.
It's interesting. I don't remember.
That's why we woke up so early. Like I think we averaged like 2 hours or 1.5 hours of sleep. And the most disgusting thing when we had to take those ferry rides, which typically were pretty beautiful, right? You're going through those like picture perfect beaches, across those beaches, palm trees. It was so beautiful.
Very refreshing too, because it was hot and there's a little bit of a breeze whenever you're in the boats too.
Yeah, and there's one major island where most of the population is living, and then they have, because they don't have enough space, right? It's basically the coast, and it instantly starts with houses going up there. There's basically no real coast or beach on the main island where most people live in.
I believe it's one of the most densely populated areas in the whole world, I believe. Oh, that's what they were talking about back when we were there.
Yeah, might be. So they didn't know where to put their trash. So they actually put all their trash on a different island and tried to burn it there. And one day, the wind was so bad that on our ferry trip, we actually got all the burned trash pushed in our way. It was so disgusting. I remember that. That was poor. People on the island had to get it as well. It was so crazy.
I mean, the fact you can still remember that means it must have been really bad.
Yeah. Just the logistics, right? That is so surprising to me.
Mm-hmm. But Nelly, I think pretty quickly once we got there, we all realized that all the signs of chaos we were afraid of in the lead up to the event do indeed absolutely materialize. It was all a pure dumpster fire of disorganization and honestly incompetence on the part of WSVG. So first, they didn't have casters for some of the games. I think StarCraft had no casters.
The day before, they asked me Nilly, you had said you watched StarCraft. Give us a list of StarCraft casters and how we can reach them.
One day before.
That's unlikely, my friend.
They didn't manage to get Kripparrian there, which I believe was one of the biggest content creators in Hearthstone. Maybe still is, actually.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he was massive. He was absolutely massive at that time. I think might have averaged 25k viewers. Hearthstone was at its peak. He had more than 10k subs and such. He was also not really happy because he also, when told, okay, you're not sleeping on the holiday island, you're sleeping on the main trash island, he said, okay, I'm leaving. Book me a flight. So they had to pay him in the full, what did we stay there? 6 days or something, an extra bungalow, because otherwise he would have left.
I do remember he was a bit of a diva, wasn't he? I mean,
I didn't want to use that word, but 100% true.
I don't remember he was
Also, he was very ununderstanding being a vegan, that Maldives wasn't 100% prepared for him.
Oh, so he was ahead of his time. He was a vegan back in 2015. I feel like that wasn't a thing back then. Or not, apparently it was, but not big in any case. Then, Nelly, they had no administrators to run the StarCraft tournament either. I think Taff and you ended up running the whole thing.
Yeah. I took the 4 English-speaking players, and we came up with the system, group stage into bracket, best of X. We decided the map pool the day before the tournament, right? Luckily, I was following StarCraft quite a bit, and they were pretty happy with my work, but still, like it was crazy. Like going into big esport offline tournament, and the day before they didn't know the map pool or the settings.
And again, I want to underscore, Neely was not supposed to be there.
No, I was like sitting there in my like bathing suit, basically. Yeah.
Then nearly no live audience was allowed inside the hall. What was the reason for that again? I don't even remember.
That's actually something that came from the island, right? Let's just remind ourselves. The idea to host this tournament was to get more people activated in non-criminal activities, and then the island decides non-participants of this event are not allowed. So there was no audience except people traveling like me, like outsiders. But there were like maybe players could bring 1+1, but I'm not even sure about that because we sometimes see some locals. But I think this might be players that lost in the round of 16 in the FIFA tournament or something.
All right, so it's just incompetence after incompetence. And fortunately or unfortunately, we do have a video that perfectly captures this chaos we're talking about here. We have a video of the entire opening ceremony. This is a video that has sort of become legendary for all the wrong reasons, and I want to play a short excerpt of it to our viewers. And keep in mind, folks, the video has not been edited, so what we'll see, and especially what we will hear, is exactly what the people who tuned into the stream got to see. A stream which, by the way, I think started like 2 hours late or something, if I remember correctly.
Gonna give a special thanks to our sponsors, starting with...
And it can't happen. Something like this cannot happen just with us. We need a whole lot of help, so...
Dave, you are absolutely right. We're gonna give a special thanks to our sponsors, starting with the Bandos, Maldives Resort and Spa happening here, ladies and gentlemen. Big thanks! This Bandos Resort, we're having the tournament in Paradise on Earth. Dave, you are absolutely right. We're gonna give a special thanks to our sponsors. We have the MMPRC, the XL NFL Trains, in partnership with BHM Traders and Urido. For the connection we have here, ladies and gentlemen, we've got Sony in partnership with the Reefside, PSM, we've got Play, and of course, ladies and gentlemen, thanks to our media, the broadcast, the partners, we have CNN Turk, Sky News, and Arabia, Multiplayer, Dream, and Public.com.
You got all the sponsors, right?
Well, still, we got more, actually. We got Twitch TV.
Yeah, so the video is 17 minutes long. So if, for whatever reason, some folks feel like they want to put themselves through the whole thing, I'll put the link down below.
Yeah, and it was like they knew that the stream was not running properly. And they said, okay, we will record it. The most important thing is that it's not going live. And this was actually the first picture that went live after people took months calling it a scam and like a horrible tournament and a horrible idea.
True. On the Age of Empires side of things, though, Nilly, I think the biggest consequence of this whole disorganization was that 2 days into the tournament, the WSVG guy confirmed to TAF that Memb and Katsuni would not be getting their plane tickets anymore. And that understandably caused a huge firestorm and drama in the community. Yeah, so Memb and Katsuni were basically the face of Woobly on Twitch. They were by far the ones who streamed the most games, and people liked them, obviously. So this was a huge kick in the gut for them, but also for the fans, obviously. And because Memb and Katsuni couldn't make it, that meant that we both stepped at the casting booth. And I think together we covered like 80% of the games. The other 20%, I'll say, were covered by you alone in what became a pretty unforgettable stream for those who watched it.
Yeah, and it felt super bad and super shady, right? Because those two deserved it the most.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the initial plan was that you then, being relatively established, casted there, and it felt like you had the most professionalism bringing to Woobly Official. I remember in the old days, you even had pre-recorded intros.
No, bro, those are not pre-recorded. It's all live. No, I'm joking. I might have had that. Yeah.
And that was special. That was absolutely special. Like, you actually started the show like in a professional way, and like that was Woobly Official standards, like 2014 or such. And so I felt absolutely undeserving to be there, right? And I know that you and Taff actually went, like, we had lunch or something, then the two of you had a talk, and then you came back and like said, okay, Neely, you can co-cast. and I felt like I was not deserving, but I obviously took the opportunity, right?
Were you never hoping they would get the chance to cast a little bit when you said you're going there as a fan? It wasn't like one part of you hoping, well, maybe they'll let me cast 1 or 2 games or something, even before you knew about the fact that Katsuni and Mem wouldn't be there.
Well, I truly believed, like, when I left, I truly believed those were there. I thought I would be more like a triple cast in an early game, or so, but
Okay.
like they were the clear top 2, right? I cast a lot of Wars Coming with them, but like, yeah, they were clearly the core of Woobly Official at that time. So, no, that was not my plan. Maybe I thought I could be involved in some way, but I was there as a fan. That was my main goal.
Right, Neely, at this point, one thing I want to make clear, though, is that despite all the things we've been talking about, I remember thinking when the tournament was over, and even now after so many years, that it was actually a pretty good tournament. You know, it was, first of all, one of the main things that I think made it great was that we actually got to see the players. You need to imagine we're back in 2015. Basically, no players were streaming. From those who made it, I think maybe Viper was the only one who regularly streamed. So we actually had no idea what the players looked like, what they sounded like, what their personalities were like, or at least I didn't. And that was great. I think everybody got along pretty well. I think players enjoyed the tournament. I don't remember any drama between them or anything.
No. It was like people really loved it, right? Obviously, it was tricky because we had it to have on local Maldives time. So it was basically midnight for Americans and early mornings for Europeans. So, like, we had some really bad viewer numbers in the very early hours as well. So, but overall, I think the product, like, and the event itself grew the community together quite a bit.
No, I agree. And the games themselves, I have great memories of the games themselves too. I think I have 2 very clear memories from the tournament. One of them was the double boar laming that Viper did against BackT. Remember that one? That's something you probably will never see again on Arabia these days, because I think boars now always spawn very far away from each other. Back then, if you are unlucky, as BackT was, they could spawn right next to each other and in the front of your base, for example. So that would be pretty easy to lane.
Might have been the first double boar lure that we've ever seen, right?
I believe
and
so.
And we also said, like, that would not have been possible online.
Correct.
Right? Because the
Too
ping,
much lag.
If you have 250 ping playing against a Vietnamese player, it is pretty much impossible.
By the way,
tougher.
I remember I was a little bit pissed at you because I was trying to hype up the moment and you were just sitting there silently. But then you told me after the series you were 100% sure BackT would call a restart. Which reminds me, we used to have restarts. If players had a horrible map or if they had a horrible start, they could call 1 restart per series, I think it was, up until minute 4, I believe. So I guess in your mind, you're like, there's no point hyping this up. He's going to call a restart anyway. Yeah. And he did.
Maybe he didn't. I know your most annoying trait was you had a phrase, "This is GG," for the scout. Like, you had this phrase, like, if a unit died and you didn't call it died, you said it's GG for this unit, for example. And like, I was always so confused because, like, why is GG now? For the scout.
Okay. You think I did it on purpose? Because I don't.
No, you didn't do it on purpose. Okay. No. It's just your phrasing.
Just the way I spoke. Okay, that's interesting. I can't listen to my old cast. It's just too cringe. No. It's just too cringe. It's impossible. And then, of course, Neely, we had a great grand final. Best of 5 between Mr. Yo and Viper. Spoilers, by the way. I wasn't expecting it to be particularly close because, 2015 was pretty much the height of Viper's domination. But Mr. Yo actually won the first 2 games. So he was leading 2-0 in the best of 5.
Double elimination meant Viper had another home map. And in the after interview, I asked him, what were your thoughts? Like, what would you have said? How likely is it that you're going to win after being down 0-2? And he said, I thought I would still win 3-2. I'm just so much better. And that was the state that we lived in.
Viper said that. You mean now?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I remember we were casting the games with Jordan, and I remember he sounding so depressed at the beginning because, Viper was his best friend. He was like, Viper, what is happening? This is something we didn't know what it was like. Viper being behind 2-0 in the best of 5 was just not thinkable anymore. I wonder if you have any good memories from games that happened in the tournament.
Obviously, heartbreaking was Mr. Yo against Ryut. I think maybe even last game. And the home map was
Baltic?
Ryut.
Was it Baltic?
Yeah.
I remember.
And you know, Baltic is basically one big clump of water, and then there's a small lake sometimes. And Ryut docked in there, so he had no deep fish. And Mr. Yo had deep fish and instantly won water. It was an 11.5-minute game, basically, simply because of the randomness of the dock spawn. When it felt like Ryut should have given a better final and was like closer to being number 2 than Mr. Yo. That was unfortunate.
Loser bracket final, just to make it clear.
Yeah. And then also, like, we didn't really address the settings back then, right? But it was hidden free pick with the option to repeat. So we could have Arabia Aztecs mirror into Ghost Lake Aztec mirror into Arena into Arena Aztec mirror. And on Arena, it was absolute standard to pick Aztecs at that time, except Loiter, who picked Britons and outplayed people with their Aztecs. And I love those games.
That's interesting because he was an arena player who just said it, right? Pretty crazy. Yeah, and you know what? We actually hit a viewership record during the final of the tournament. Are you guys ready to hear how much it was? 2,750 viewers. I'm sure we had more than that, like 5 minutes after Tristan going live for Hidden Cup 5 or something. Pretty sure it had more than that. Yeah. Sounds ridiculous for today's standards, obviously, but I think the previous record before that was 1,500, which I believe came from the final of War is Coming. So we've come a long way, my friends, a long way. Yeah. Okay, on the flip side, though, of course, there were also a lot of things that didn't run as they should. And it's interesting because I'd completely forgotten about this until I read your notes, Neely. But at some point, we were pretending to cast the games live, but we're actually casting recorded games. So why did we do that? Was it because the time zone was just horrible? I don't even remember anymore.
I think they had to close down the venue at like 8 p.m. local time or something. So we kind of didn't have enough time to have games played consecutively, so we had to overlap, and then we pretended that those games were live, and then one of the most awkward moments of at least my life happened. I don't know how much you remember it, but like basically camera in our faces, right? And we are starting to like, oh, now the players are walking on stage.
Seriously?
And we are stretching our heads into the camera while and then we go into the recorded game.
Knowing full well they're not there.
Yeah. And like, okay, the action is starting. Like they're cracking their knuckles. And
I don't remember any of that.
The recorded game dropped at minute 14 and says like record stopped.
I remember none of that. I think I might have just to save my shame or something. I remember not. What did we do then? We just admitted it.
You actually filled in the audience.
Dude, I remember none of that. That's crazy. Okay. Well, I'm glad. Well, no, actually, I'm mad at you because now I will have to remember it for the rest of my life. Okay, something else I didn't even perceive as being a bad thing back then, but people today would absolutely lose their minds, and you already touched on it, is that we had mass mirror matches in the whole tournament. First game in each series was always played on Arabia, and I think apart from one game, it was all Aztecs Wars. And Aztecs Wars, yeah. And, any water map, even the one you were just talking about before, would always be Vikings War. Not even people wouldn't even have to think, and that's basically why that game you were talking about finished so early, because if you lose water, if you're 1 second too late to the game is basically over. No fire galleys to counter normal galleys back then, no demo rafts, none of that thing. So it's all galley micro war only. And I actually think this might be one of the things in the professional scene where we've improved the most over the years, nearly. Just how many more civs are actually viable in competitive Age of Empires 2 these days, right?
Well, there are way more civs as well, right? How many did we have? 18?
True.
At that time?
18, correct.
I think so.
18, yeah. Yeah, but so you have like 4. Well, let's be generous and say there are 4 viable civs.
Yeah, right? That's why the one Britain pick is so crazy for me on Arena, right? Yeah, it was. We basically mainly saw Aztecs, Mayans, Huns, sometimes maybe like double Arabia,
Vikings,
for example, and Vikings. Those were the dominating one. And games were really repetitive, and it came down a lot to execution, not a lot to strategy.
Mm-hmm. I think if you were playing Nomad, which wasn't really a common pick, Mr. Yo was one of the guys who actually liked to play Nomad and didn't pick it in the final against Viper. I remember people were mad about it almost because he was leading 2-0 and he didn't choose to pick his best map. But I think he said he didn't want to let chance win because Nomad was considered a very lucky map. Mm-hmm. And I guess in that case, what would you see? Persians, Chinese was like the most common picks on Nomad, right? I think Chinese.
Yeah, Persians were probably number one. Chinese back then still started with like 6 villagers, so you got the TC up a bit earlier.
And you could scout more. That was also an important point, I think.
Yeah.
And then, of course, Nearly, no conversation about the WSVG tournament would be complete without mentioning the incident. Probably one of the most talked about things in the whole LAN. And I'll play for you guys the clip, and there's actually a good chance you might have seen this without knowing where it took place or who one of the protagonists of the clip was. So check this out.
Usually get a discount. That's how their site works. That's how the system works.
What now?
I don't want my Drake to get blown up, so I don't want my Drake to get blown up, so the Germans are invading. Not good. He took something. Burgled. Burgled. We got burgled. Actually, where is my bag? Where's the bag?
Knowledge is power, and I know a lot.
So, yeah, the guy stealing the bag, yeah, that would be me. And it was funny because I only realized how big the story had become once I got back home and watched the whole video. It was also funny to see conspiracy theories developing around this video. I remember reading the comments and people were saying it was all staged by Kripparrian because how could someone be so dumb to steal live on stream a bag, and because the camera angle was all too perfect. I think the video has got like 150,000 views or something. My most popular video, definitely.
Yeah, it was massive, right? Not really on our end. Like Age of Empires people only got it like from it being so popular and being the same event, but it was live streamed to like 30,000 viewers, massive amount of clicks, and I think it even got on Reddit as well. So I think I wouldn't be surprised if it has 7-digit views there.
You think so? That would be crazy.
Yeah.
In any case, the explanation is very, very simple. There were several casting rooms there in the day, and in the day before, we both had been casting in that room. In the room that Kripparrian was in. And we were casting from a laptop. That's where I remember. Now, that laptop had a bag. So when I'm just walking around the corridor, I look through the door, I see a bag that looks remotely like the laptop bag. So I just go in and I take it. Turns out it wasn't the laptop bag. So after they noticed, they called me. I realized the mistake. I obviously gave the bag back. And as far as I was concerned, that was it. So I'm not a burglar. This wasn't staged. It was all just an honest mistake. But people usually don't like hearing the simple explanations. They always want there to be more to it. Any funny stories from you that you remember, actually?
More of a wild one. I think it was the day before the tournament start. Or maybe something on the early days when we were still constructing a lot. And I obviously did a lot, right? I also helped like constructing the stage for the FIFA people. And like we tried to set up the screens for them to play on. And so the last ferry already went. And therefore I actually slept the night on the island. But obviously being a non-player, I was not allowed to sleep in one of the real bungalows. So I slept with the staff on like the 4-layer bunk beds in one of the weird no AC rooms for some hours. and they were a bit confused what the white guy is doing there, and but like they all let me sleep, and then I woke up, ate breakfast, and went back to work. Yeah, that was a special experience. Simply like trying to save 2 hours traveling time, and obviously there was no ferry, I think, to get back anyways. Jeanette did the same. I think we both stayed the night there.
Oh, I remember. I mean, you guys were sharing a room in the hotel, so I guess you shared a room there too. That's interesting. In any case,
it was not a room. It was like a room with 60 beds. Right? It was the whole staff that was resting or sleeping there.
60 beds in one room, and everybody was just sleeping together. All right. Yeah. I think the Age of Empires 2 part of the LAN was most likely actually the most successful part of it. Players got their tickets, food, accommodation, everything was paid for. And most importantly, because the money for the prize pool was raised by Voobly independently, or basically by the Tyrant sponsor, let's be honest, players got their prizes as soon as the event was over. The same cannot be said of the other games, though. I believe some players never got their money. I remember reading articles about it.
That's what I heard as well. Also, flights were a big problem. And one of the backstories there when it comes to flights, I think like Air Maldives or some airline was one of the main sponsors of the tournament as well. And they said, okay, yeah, we will cover all the flights, right? And that's why WSVG said, wow, that's a major saving element for us. And that's why we decided for the Maldives, right? And then I think like 4 weeks before, they said, okay, we will do 50-50. And WSVG was like, that's tens of thousands of dollars that we have to pay now. Like, that's crazy. And they said, yeah, no worries. But also, you don't have to take our airline now. Just take any airline, and we will cover half the costs. And I think like 1 week before, they said, yeah, we won't cover anything.
Crazy.
And then WSVG said, well, we had a contract. What's going to happen? And then the airline said, good luck trying to sue a Maldive company on a Maldive court. I think WSVG didn't even try it. Yeah, and that was like massive money burn for them, obviously, as well.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I obviously never got the money for my plane tickets. Neither did my wife, because they also promised they would pay for my wife's stay. And yeah, so WSVG pretty much disappears after the tournament, and it basically becomes this huge scam. I mean, a lot of people remember this tournament as being a huge scam. Let's be honest, that's what it was. Okay, and sort of wrap up the story, Nili, as I told folks at the start, I think this tournament was sort of a pivotal moment in the history of the competitive scene, because I believe, and I think you have a little bit of a different take, and I'll be happy to hear it, I believe this tournament marked the beginning of the end of Voobly as like the central tournament host of the scene. Up until that point, most major tournaments around those years were played on Voobly, organized by Voobly, and streamed by Voobly. But after the WSVG thing, things started to change a little bit. And one of the things, I believe, is that it's really hard to overstate what a huge drama it was that Katsuni and Memb didn't make it to the Maldives. To be clear, it was 100% not Voobly's fault. We were never in charge of getting tickets for people. Again, we had to pay for our own tickets. The thing is, WSVG was sort of this anonymous organization no one knew anything about, but Voobly did have a face, and that face was TAF. So he got a lot of the blame for it. And I think that, combined with other things, which would be unfair for me to talk about now, eventually led to TAF's resignation from Voobly. Memb and Katsuni were understandably not happy at all either, and Katsuni basically stopped streaming for Voobly at that point. I think Memb didn't completely stop streaming for Voobly, but he did start investing more and more time in his own stream. Now, as I said at the beginning, Memb and Katsuni did like 90% of the streaming on Voobly Official, so after they were gone, it was very hard to keep sort of the same activity and the same streaming hours, so I do believe that was the beginning of the end. But the fact Voobly stopped organizing tournaments meant other people started doing it themselves. So Memb decides to organize King of the Desert in 2017. You organized Nili's Apartment Cup in 2018. Tristan organized the Hidden Cup, I think, also in 2018. So we slowly started becoming less or more decentralized and more focused on individuals, which was probably a good thing in this case. But again, I think you disagree a little bit with my analysis, right?
Also, like, Escape Gaming formed after it, right? So like another big major player, like Zero Empires getting actual contact with Microsoft was a major thing, like leading us to get more tournaments. Like I think our like T90 my tournaments were more of the side stories of the big Escape Gaming League happening. And then obviously there was a lot of drama around who's going to stream that, but that's a different podcast. I also think, like, as I said, like it's 15 volunteers trying to run one show, like Woobly Official. And there are always conflicts in like who wants what, because some of the casters were putting in so many hours. Should they get rewarded? Other people are saying, okay, I have another full-time job. I'm doing this for free. So like different ideas there where you want to go. Then obviously Katsuni was a very politically incorrect person, and like
at least
should people continue working with him? And like there were so many hardcore fans loving him as well, right?
I think he was very charismatic. It was an incredibly charismatic guy, in my opinion. Funny, but yeah, a bit controversial.
He would have been cancelled in our standards like nowadays. That's
after one stream.
Yeah. And I also think that Taff resigning kind of happened a bit before. I know that he talked to me and felt like he wanted to, like he had a daughter, wanted to spend a bit more time with her. He was, I think, a relatively high manager as well, and felt like, wow, I have like big decisions. Like he gave me some digits, but like massive company decisions, and he was doing organizational stuff for what was coming, right, instead of it. So he wanted to shift a bit there, but certainly it was like the last tournament from the old Woobly Official era and led us more into the more individual stream era.
Right, which again, I think it's probably a good thing, because otherwise we wouldn't have the scene that we currently have, right? Anyway, Neely, listen, this was a lot of fun, going down memory lane with you. Thank you very much for taking the time, thinking about all these things. And if you folks enjoyed this video, I would like to know what you guys think about it, and maybe you want us to take another deep dive into other types of tournaments. We've been around for a long time. We know a lot of these things. We lived through a lot of these things. And again, let us know in the comment section down below if you have any suggestions for other tournaments. And again, don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you enjoyed this video. Neely, once more, thank you so much for taking the time, and I'll see you next time.